Hang on. Hold that thought. Okay. Okay, we're recording, I think. Anyways, it should be recording. Hopefully it is. Super excited. Justin Daerr with us today. Justin wave. Obvious in the hat. Some of you know Justin really well, and some of you, he's brand new to you. Um, Justin, how long have we known each other?
uh October or September of 2004.
Yeah, so
So
quite a while.
21 years or almost 21 years.
Yep. So good friends, training partners, racing partners, endurance corner together for many years. The camp was originally endurance corner and Gordo and then Justin and continued friend, coach. Justin was a professional triathlete for how many years? 20 years as well?
15.
15 years. Ironman champion, Ironman Boulder champion, over 50 pro Ironmans, one of the fastest runners in the sport. What's your personal record for Ironman, Justin?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, fast, really
Wouldn't be
fast.
fast now, whatever it is.
Eight something. But anyways, long history, phenomenal athlete, obviously phenomenal person, and now going into the sports psychology arena. And I'm really excited about that because I know you're going to do just an amazing job. So I'm really excited that Justin was willing to come on here and chat with all of us. So I'm not going to say any more. I'm just going to turn the table over to him and let him do his thing. Justin, one thing we do here with these team meetings is we also encourage it to be, if it suits you, a little bit interactive, questions from people. We keep it casual enough that, and we're all used to each other enough. I feel like they can, chime in, speak up, ask questions, that kind of thing. But I'll let you run the show. So that's it for me.
Yeah, so I have 14 slides, which if I was doing a presentation in person, I probably wouldn't even have that many. Just for the sake of like the flow, what I would suggest would be let me run through the material and put in questions in the chat as they're coming up, and we'll segue straight into that and open the discussion up. Just because I can't really see everyone's face and kind of read the room as to who would have a question or what's going on. So I'll share my. Did that share over, Marilyn?
I said yes to the
Okay,
share.
there we go. There it is.
Yep.
Okay. Um, this thing. Um, that's my slideshow. Oh, whatever. Doesn't matter. So
Sorry, if you go back to slideshow and that drop down, there was presenter view. I think that was probably what you were looking for.
yeah, there it is. All right. Thank you. So basically, Marilyn had asked me to meet like a month ago and I couldn't do it. And so I had actually put together some slides based off of another presentation that I had done. And then a month went by and I went back and I was like, I'm not really sure what I was thinking at that time. So we'll see how this goes. But basically, so my background and how I led into sport and performance psychology, like Marilyn said, I was in triathlon professional from '06 to 20. I did not have a sporting background in an official capacity growing up, so I started out kind of late, was self-taught, self-coached in college, moved through age group field and went professional. And around 2009, I'd been professional for a little while and felt like I just wasn't getting what I needed out of myself, and I didn't feel it was training related, whether that was correct or not. I just felt like I should be performing at a higher level of my abilities. And so I reached out to somebody to work in the mental performance space. And at the time, I really had very, very little money. So I spent my final dollars on this. That's how much I thought it mattered. And that has remained kind of a metaphor for where I place it. Not that I think it's more important than your training or preparation, but it's just something that I think has been sort of at the forefront of my own thinking when it comes to performance. Also been coaching for 20 plus years. And then just now I finished up a master's in sports psych. And as the final piece of that, I've been working directly in the field with high school track and field teams, strength and conditioning facilities, one-on-one work with different types of athletes, some professional. And I think one of the main things I would say is that I don't simply see performance psychology from the theories that are around it. I pull from everything, whether that's performance psych, sports psych, organizational psych, behavioral economics, game theory, and basically anything I find interesting, and particularly in history, I think of survival stories and like why people made it through really adverse conditions and how we can learn from that as it relates to performance. As I've moved into sports psych, so this is the definition that you would find if you went into the APA Division 47. The reason I put it on there is because the first part of it, I think, is something that gets focused on. So the ability to perform at the higher end of our abilities. The second piece, which is actually included, but is overlooked, is enjoying the performance process. So I believe strongly that in order to achieve the greatest performance, you have to sincerely and deeply enjoy what it is that you are doing. And more in sort of a philosophical outlook, I believe everyone's worthy of pursuing their best. And particularly, even if the best is not the best, I think there's a lot of assumption that to try to find the most out of yourself, it needs to be worth something from an external reward. I don't believe in that. And I also have an idea of trying to help create what I call athletes for life. So I've seen a lot of people burn out of sport, whether that's from high school athletics, collegiate athletics, professional athletics, and then decide they're no longer an athlete. And so one of the things is you may or may not spend your entire life at your peak performance level, but I believe that everyone should and can be an athlete for life. And that just gets recontextualized over time. And that's just something that I kind of take in as a focus, particularly in working with youth athletes. So, and going back to sort of 2009, when I was thinking about how I could increase my own performance, extract more from myself, I came across this idea from Bobby McGee, what he called the 90/9/1 principle. And he first wrote about it in Magical Running. And there's also some, it's kind of out there, but it kind of is something that was presented to me at that time in 2009 and is something that I thought about and continue to think about all the time. And the basic idea behind the 90/9/1 principle is that 90% of athletes perform below their training, 9% according to it, and 1% beyond it. And Bobby McGee believed that the disconnect lied in the mind. And this was not necessarily something that was grounded in like hard research. It was just an anecdotal sort of observation that Bobby had made after working and seeing a lot of athletes perform. And it really doesn't matter whether those numbers are exact because it's more of just understanding that many, many people train very well, prepare very well, and do not then perform in accordance with that. That's really the main thing that I kind of want you all to think about within that. And so I started to think, why is that the case? Why is it that we prepare and don't perform? And I think that the way that I could present this comes in these formation of an equation. And so for a long time, I think many people think of if you prepare, you then perform. Sort of that whatever you put in, you're going to get directly out like a function. And while I don't think it's incorrect, I do think it's incomplete. And where I think performance comes into play is you prepare. Once you prepare, you have an opportunity to perform. And then once you have preparation, opportunity, you have to execute under those circumstances. And then in the end, you have performance. And why, and sort of in breaking that down into more specific pieces, what is preparation? You all would know it as certainly all the training that you're putting in. Um, Additionally, it'd be skill development. It would also be making sure you're absorbing the training. I would also consider it to be any sort of understandings that you have related to where you're going to perform. So understanding courses, understanding your competition, anything that's what's called the work. And while I'm presenting on performance psych here, I want to be very clear that you cannot have exceptional performance if you don't put in the work. There is no way to replace that. So if you were to think about someone who studied a lot for a test, they could go into a test and underperform because they get anxiety, they freeze up, and they just can't transfer their knowledge into what's when it matters. But you can't take someone that's unprepared and magically give them knowledge for a test. All right. So both could have the same poor grade, but in one case, you can actually transfer it potentially into the performance, where in the other case, you cannot. And so, performance psych, whatever, it's not a hack. Next is this idea of opportunity. And the reason I started thinking about the idea of opportunity came in an article I was writing for Endurance Corner one time. It was about running fast off the bike. So sort of what sort of training are we trying to put together so that we can effectively run fast off the bike? And I went through a series of laying out the workouts, and then at the end of the article, I wrote in a piece there where I really wanted people to take home that just because you did all these things doesn't mean you're going to run fast off the bike. It only means if you do all the right things in your preparation, you may have the opportunity to do that. Right? It's not the guarantee of it. And I think often that there have been certain what I call fitness heuristics that have developed where if you do a certain thing in training, it's supposed to equate to a performance time, right? So if you think about Yasso's 800s being the predictor of a marathon, or what I called, there's, Jack Daniels has, if you run 10 by 400 on 1 minute rest, your best average pace would be your mile time. And so those are all good ideas of what you may have the capability of doing, but you only have the opportunity to do it, not the guarantee of it. And additionally, uh, opportunities are all in and of themselves unique, and they are never the same, and they are not guaranteed. So maybe a few of you have been to some races that have been, I don't know, well, any of you were training in 2020 and then COVID happened and none of you raced. So that's just an example of something being taken away from you. But also when people are in proximity to high performance, so that extra lunge at the line or that extra bit of effort, they may think, well, I'll just do that next time, and they may never get a next time to do that. So I think it's really important to remember that all you opportunities are unique, and while certain opportunities may be similar, they're never repeated. So I like to think also about when you get the chance to perform, to be grateful for those opportunities instead of taking them for granted. Then finally, you have the execution piece. And this is kind of what I would consider to be, what you can do, what your physical abilities are, and being able to perform at a high percentage of them when it matters the most. I think about the test example was one example, but I think if you were to take a gymnastics balance beam and place it on the ground, all of you would be able to just walk across it sort of without thinking. We raise it 4 feet above the ground. Some of you might still have the confidence to walk across it fairly briskly, but you might be bringing in a certain level of apprehensiveness as to whether you might slip or not. So your time might go down a little bit, but the skill demand has not changed. If you take that beam and you put it 100 feet in the air, everyone would have a fear, but the skill hasn't changed. So in all of those situations, you're still trying to do the same thing, but the context and the consequences are different. And so that leads to how do I get the most out of myself in those circumstances? And then the final two pieces on here I think are worth mentioning is that, a lot of people think that to win an age group, to win a race, to win money, all these types of things, they look good on paper and they're good when you're preparing. But when you actually get out there and you're just really, really uncomfortable, those things won't be enough for you to get the most out of yourself. And that's why I have this idea of sort of a value-driven why, which is basically like understanding why it is that you want to push through these difficulties to get the most out of yourself. And I really hesitated to come up with that because I get quite frustrated anytime there's a conversation about having to define your why. It's just not, it's not the type of conversations I like to have. But I do think that understanding what it is and what is driving you has to be much more than simply the outcome at the end. That pursuit of personal excellence is defined by everybody individually. And it's what you go to when all you want to do is to make the discomfort go away. And this is what I had created. I made this this is a handout I gave to high school kids, which I call the flywheel, but Brooke calls it performance cycle because it's not in a flywheel format. And so as you can see, the preparation, opportunity, execution leads into the performance. And then the next piece is the reflection, assessment, and growth piece. Because it is this piece as well that is particularly important in trying to understand how do we continue to get better performance out of ourselves. And I think during this process is when we have to dig into where did something go wrong? Was I not well prepared? Did I not seize the opportunity? Did I not execute? Where in these different levels of domains can I seek some improvement? And how do I take that new information and apply it to the future to get a little bit better the next time around? This would be really indicative of sort of the fixed and growth mindset sort of idea, where if you're not taking the information that you've just learned and put it to the future, then at best you're going to repeat what you've done and most likely you'll just go worse. And looking back to these, what I call domains, is basically that the causes of why performance breakdowns, meaning not achieving what you're trying to achieve, they vary. And I think the domains are helpful in trying to understand. They all affect each other, but they can be good areas to focus on of like, where did things fall apart to begin with, and how did that affect every other level? And I think also that when you're asking these questions about yourself in those domains, it leads to heightened self-awareness. And having self-awareness of your performance, whether it went good or bad, is highly crucial to continued improvement in performance. And I'll just sit on that for a second, because what I've often seen is when people lack that and you ask them, okay, why did the race not go well? Why didn't you perform to your level? The information that you'll get back from them is like, this is somewhat hyperbolic, but it could be like, why didn't you race well? It'd be like, well, I don't know, I had 3 instead of 2 tacos on Wednesday. Just something that has no connection to what's going on, but somehow they're using it as a means to, that's why something didn't work out. Rather than going back into themselves and saying, well, they were pushing the pace on the bike and I was afraid I couldn't go with them. And so I let them go. And then a big gap came up and I couldn't close it. That is being self-aware and understanding why you didn't get what you wanted, so that you can then apply those lessons to the future. And additionally, and going back to the ideas around enjoyment, I think the athletes that can get the most out of themselves, they enjoy each part of this process. They enjoy the training. They look forward to getting the opportunity to race. They love the racing. And then even if they don't love, they appreciate what they learned and they love applying it to the future. They take enjoyment in each level of the process. Finally, within performance psych, there's a constant hearkening on this idea of performance excellence. And performance excellence to me is, well, and just in general, not just to me, but performance excellence is personal. So what an Olympian is trying to get out of their performance, what some of us maybe get out of their performance are all different. But we get to define that. And I sort of went into an example here of how I saw performance excellent when racing professionally is not the same as it is now. But something that I've often gone to is this idea of good faith failure. Good faith failure is it's okay to not succeed so long as I gave it an honest effort, that I went out and did what I had intended to do with good faith. And if that fell short, no matter what the circumstance is, I would consider that performance excellence. And again, I believe at every level, it involves enjoyment, particularly because it takes a very long time to be good at anything that you do. And so it'll be difficult to do that if you're not enjoying it. And Molly Seidel, if you all don't know her, she is an American distance runner. She was bronze medalist in Tokyo in the marathon. And she is a fun person. She has a sort of gregarious nature to her. She is funny. She has a good sense of humor. It comes across on her social media feeds and those sorts of things. And one day on Strava, she wrote something, I don't remember what it was, but the idea was basically, to not confuse having a good time with not working extremely hard. Because I think there's often been this assumption that you need to be like in the grind to be succeeding. Whereas I would actually say, no, you need to be having fun with your friends while also simultaneously being very serious towards a goal. And that's what'll tie things together over the long term. And I don't remember how I was going to tie this in when I originally included it, but on the Science of Sport podcast a few years ago, there was a tennis trainer, or PT, I think, who was on there, and he worked with I can't remember which nationality, but he was at the US Open and he was on a spin bike in one of the warm-up rooms. If you've ever seen, they're kind of in there hitting balls and on spin bikes, and he was riding next to Billie Jean King. And whatever the circumstances were, he was sitting next to her and he was just pouring out his heart on all of his sort of frustrations in working with this federation. They weren't listening to him. They weren't taking his advice. Like, things weren't getting across, blah, 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 blah. And he's just going and going and going. And Billy just kind of stopped and looked at him and said, say his name was John, be like, John, champions adapt. And it was such a simple term that I've really, really liked, which is we're often thinking about our hardships, our difficulties, and we may want everything else to adapt to us instead of adapting to it. But I think Billie Jean King's advice that champions adapt means in whatever circumstance, whatever adversity that comes up, taking on a championship mentality, mindset, whatever you want to call it, persona, is an ability to adapt. And it is through that adaptation that champions arise. And so I also like to think of it as it's not something that's done by the people over here that are champions. It's something that we can do ourselves. And with that, I'm done.
Nice. Excellent. I would like to, how do we get out of this shared screen so we can see everyone's face again? Awesome. From here, if people want to unmute and go ahead, and we'll open up the floor for questions, thoughts, sharing, all of that kind of stuff.
Hey Justin, this is Rebecca. I agree with everything you're saying. I had a couple of questions. I've got this friend, this crazy friend who kind of trains okay, you know, she's all right, like she's nothing special, but she gets into a race and honestly, she's freaking a crazy, like we used to call it she turns on a crazy brain. And it's just like, how do you how do you become that crazy brain person that can just like get in there and just kill people?
Yeah, well, one thing I would say is you have to be careful in trying to replicate something that's working for somebody else. Because if you try to be, you know, maybe you're trying to be like super chill with your training and then go bananas with your racing, and maybe that doesn't work. And
Mm,
so on the flip side, perhaps if she were to be super rigorous with her training and as serious as you were, it would make her not capable of competing.
uh,
So I don't necessarily think that like you always want to kind of look at to what extent something is working for that person. And there may be things that you can learn from them, but it's not necessarily means that it's something to model, if that makes sense.
mm,
Um, there was a time I was at um there's a local swim coach, Wolfgang Dietrich. He used to be a triathlete in the 80s and 90s, but he coaches here. And I was just chatting to him while the kids were swimming, and he was talking about this one girl who he just thought, you know, man, she just like she never does anything in training. Like, you know, her times are just unremarkable or whatever, but you put her on the blocks in a race and she blasts. And his basic idea was as a coach, he's like, I'm just not going to, like, as long as that continues to happen, I'm not going to get in the way.
mm,
Like, once the times start not showing up, then we have to have a different conversation. But basically, it's sort of, I would take away from that sort of, we all have our own ways of accessing what it is that we want. And so definitely learn from others, but be careful in doing it as a modeling.
mm. I just want a bit of that crazy brain when I'm running. I do have another question if anyone else doesn't have
Sure.
questions. Does anyone else have questions?
Go for it.
Okay. So something, it comes back to the crazy brain kind of running. Something that for me personally, like, and I totally get all those steps that you were talking about, 100% agree and get it. It's also the self-belief in yourself, your weakness, you know, like you become so obsessed with your weakness. Like for me, it's running. So you kind of feel, oh yeah, I'm a good swimmer, I'm a good cyclist, but that friggin' run, you know, like, and it's, you know, switching that around to like, no matter, like I've been running for, oh my God, 20 odd years, and I still have this belief I'll never be a runner. You know, it's just that kind of, how do you get over that kind of, because you're not going to get better if you keep believing that. Do you know what I mean? I'm getting at.
Yeah, so that would be like in one of the problems in trying to put together a presentation is, you know, what is it you would focus on? So I would probably spend an entire month
Yeah.
talking specifically about confidence and
Mm,
what is sort of more academically referred to sometimes as self-efficacy, which is sort of the ability to perform a skill or produce an outcome. And because I think that it runs the spectrum. Like, I don't care if you are a very, very experienced and well-established professional, you're constantly in a struggle to
yeah.
maintain the right level of confidence, all the way down to, you know, some athletes that I've been around that are just getting into a sport and are trying to understand confidence. So one thing I'll say is I have the term self-efficacy that I just referred to. The reason I bring that up is because I think that the word confidence can be misleading because a lot of people can be confident, but they're incorrect. So you can think that you can do something, but you have no information to inform the fact that you can actually do it. Right. But once you've started to repeat something over and over again and you're getting information, if you're then confident, it's coming from information, or what I would call informed confidence.
Mm,
That's sort of self-efficacy. And then moving from there, I think, again, in the same of understanding what it is that leads to someone performing really well, you also have to understand what it is that each person derives confidence from, like what makes you confident.
mm,
And in those spaces, I would sort of look to the extent to which some pitfalls I would see would be not focusing on personal progression if there's anything to compare it to. So it'd be like, imagine somebody being in the weight room and they bench press 100 pounds for the first time, and that's a PR. And then they look over and someone next to them has benched 300. And so all of a sudden, something they were proud of is now something that's diminished because now there's a comparison. And so I often hear language of but, just, and only. So I benched 100, or I set a PR, but it
mm,
was only 100.
mm.
I benched 100, but it was only 100. Yeah, but it was just, yeah, but it was only. And
Mm,
so a lot of the disqualifying your own achievements and your own progression is, I'm not saying that's something you do, but that's something I see pretty common.
yeah, yeah,
And then as well, I think it's not allowing the space for something new in the future to happen. So just because, if you felt that you had underperformed in the run in the past, does not mean that you are destined to do that in the future. So
mm,
allowing yourself to have space for a new you, so to speak, to perform. Those are a couple things that I see happen a lot. Um, it would take some time to dive deeply into that, but that would be sort of one of the starting
yeah,
areas is, kind of understanding what it is that you derive confidence from, and then focusing on how you can use that to build yourself up.
yeah, yeah. Yep.
So I
I
guess
was,
like building on that, I'm gonna jump in. I would say like looking at myself, I build confidence by seeing a lot of hit workouts. Like if I see a sea of green and I've nailed a whole series of workouts and I know there's been intensity in those, like I'm on a high, I feel really prepared that I'm going to be able to execute. I feel like that training's been done. Um, but I think that that sometimes runs counter to having a growth mindset where like actually having a workout that stretches you that you can't hit, right? So you miss it. But then if you're building confidence from having like nailed your workouts, then like how does that translate to being confident in your execution?
So let me make sure I'm hearing this correctly. So you're saying that you're deriving confidence from having executed a bunch of workout as designed, but you're wondering whether you're not stretching yourself enough so that it would lead to you becoming a new type of athlete. Is that what I'm sort of getting at?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of maybe Marilyn, if you're understanding. I mean, I think you build workouts that stretch me, right? But I think there's also an aspect of like if I don't hit the workouts, but they're meant to stretch me to like I'm not maybe necessarily even meant to hit them, or there's a couple weeks where I don't hit them before I do. Like I understand why we do those, but I think in terms of where I build my confidence from, it's definitely from actually hitting the workout as it's like been designed. So it's like I guess how do you strike that balance?
Um, so there's a couple things I would think about. One would be think about stretching yourself in the moments where it matters most. So you could push yourself to failure in a workout, or you could push yourself to failure in a race. And when you're on a record, what I call like going on the record. So I was always hesitant to do anything benchmarky in training because I was like, then I want to go on the record. Like if you're going to make me run as fast as possible, I want it on the record. I want to be in the race. So it could just be that having the space to perform to the appropriate levels in training is allowing you the extra space to go deep when it matters because you haven't cashed those chips in too early. When they're not, yes, you might get a PR workout, but that may not be, I mean, if that is all that you would want, super. Some people just like to train and go really hard. But if you're trying to get it in a race, you do want to have that extra piece. I will say if I put on my coaching hat, and you ask all the people that I've coached, they'll probably say like, I mean, they may have a bad day and they don't complete a workout because they're not feeling well. But the fact how I would have actually written it, they'll probably say like 5 times in their lifetime I've ever written something that I'm like, you may not achieve this. And it's only been in very, very few circumstances where I've assigned those types of sessions because I do think they will add to their growth. But in many other cases, I would be afraid that having them fail too much in training would lead to them not executing training appropriately and then also losing their confidence because I'm giving them things that they're not hitting. So I think that's
Yeah.
also like sort of a strategy of training. Training is meant for racing, but training is not racing. They are two separate things. And if you cash too much in on the one end, you won't have anything left on the back. That would be my kind of melding the two worlds that I've lived in.
Bruce, we can't hear you. I can see Bruce Turner is talking, but I can't hear you.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I don't have a question. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
You know,
Joanne,
Justin,
do you wanted to?
sorry, I
Sorry.
was watching that F1 series. I don't know what it's called. Drive to Survive. Drive to Survive. And I just see that so often, like like these guys are professionals getting paid millions of dollars, and you can see them just talk themselves out of like being good. You know, they're obviously good, but being the best. And it's crazy. You just see it so clearly.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you all were around a lot of professionals in a lot of different fields, I think you all would be shocked
Mm,
how often that is the case. But also, I mean, like there are some professional athletes that absolutely do things very, very well in every single, like you're like, that is the model. Like that's how
mm,
you, and then you'll see some, you're like, man, they're so good, but you don't need to have that sharp a vision. You'd be like, they have so much potential. Like you can just see that they could be doing, I don't necessarily even mean mental performance, but they could be eating better, they could be training better, they could be sleeping better, they could whatever, doesn't matter. Um, so yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like they're really, really fast and they struggle like everybody else.
mm,
And that's something as well, particularly in working with youth athletes. I'm like, do not think that, the professional, the elites or something that you model, they don't get scared or they don't lack but they have learned with ways to have those things and then perform. So like, yes, I am nervous. Yes, I have a lot of anxiety. Yes, I'm lacking confidence, but I'm going to be able to turn it around and deal with those things and perform. So, and not just in sport, but I mean, people in any profession, any area where there's some objective outcome that can be measured, this would apply.
yeah. Thanks.
Anyone else? We've got lots of people and lots of you who race and are working on different things that are, exciting and challenging. And this is a great opportunity to take advantage of Justin being here. Bear?
I have a question. I don't know how cogent it is, but I'll try to get it out. So it really resonated to me, Justin, when you talked about perhaps in a race, the optimal place to be is you're working really hard and you're having fun. In any given race, there are moments of I'm having a blast. I'm having a really good time. And then there are the moments of oh my God, this really sucks. This really hurts. There's that gap I've got to fill. I don't know if I can do it. This is miserable. But I know later on I will slip back into that. I'm having fun again. And so just, are there strategies that, I know this is probably very individualistic, but there are strategies when you're having those, I'm hanging from my fingernail moments, and this is not pleasant. That you can maybe plane out the whole race to optimize trying to keep a steady state in your head, even though you're suffering in terms
Yeah.
of fun factor.
So one thing with the enjoyment or the fun piece is I'm not saying necessarily that suffering is fun. But what I would say is that the enjoyment comes from everything. Like,
Sure.
because I have seen people who are like, they love to train, they don't actually love to race. They kind of race to justify the training.
Yeah.
So that to me is like, what I would say is, yes, you might be suffering in the race. Maybe sometimes you're having fun, sometimes you're not. But when you zoom out, you're like, I love to
Right.
race.
Got
That's
it.
sort of what I'm trying to get across. Not so much like the narrow. I mean, sometimes you know, if you train a lot, there are days where you do not want to train. Um, and that is okay. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't only train the days where you're like, this is fun, I'm having fun. But what it might be is that like it matters to you what you want to try to get out of yourself. And so you have sort of a value of getting out and doing the thing because it's serving the broader purpose. And it's that purpose that's getting you the collective enjoyment of everything. Like, so you might, and typically like the enjoyment is the later term payoff as well. So you might feel better like in the next hour if you don't do your workout, and then that's it. So like tomorrow you don't feel good about it. A week now you don't feel good about it. Assuming that you're not wrecked. I just mean if you're making a choice to do something.
Sure.
Um, but in going back to your kind of how did you frame the original piece where you said,
Well, I think it kind of comes down to really, I mean, getting through those hanging by your fingertip moments,
yeah,
strategies to do that, to get through it, knowing that there's a reward for getting to the other side.
yeah. So something that when I was racing that I used to say to myself, and it was something I really truly believed, was I was like, every time I race, I learn something new about myself because there's going to be a new challenge that's going to be presented on that day that I've never faced before. And when I face that, am I going to rise to the challenge? Like, am I going to rise to the moment, to the new moment that I'd never been in before? And I'll never have the opportunity to go back and redo. This is it. I close this gap or I never close this gap because that gap is gone forever. And, you know, if you give it a go and you don't close it, but you gave it a go, that's cool. But I think there's a bigger piece of, man, I didn't try. That's the piece that's harder to live with. So
True.
I finished a lot of bad Ironmans. Not a lot, but some. And people would be like, why didn't you pull out? Why didn't you drop out of the race? And I was like, I just had to know it would never get better. I had to go the whole way to the finish line to just know like that whole day was awful and there was no redemption. There was no turning around. It was just awful the whole day. And then I could go to sleep and get up and get back to work the next day. But, I have had a few, I would say like, I think I had 5 or 6 DNFs and half I should have and made the right call and the other half I didn't. But I also had a lot of races where I stayed in where I probably should have dropped out. So, but I was like, this idea of me going forward in my mind and predicting how something was going to go based on how I was feeling right then, that was something I had a hard time getting over in the future. Um, because we don't know what's down the road. Um, and, but yeah, I think that challenge piece, that opportunity will never come back again. Those two pieces can be fun ways to rise to the occasion. and just kind of giving yourself a little pep talk.
Thank you.
So Justin, now that you've done all this study and learnt all these things post your professional career, what would you have changed in your professional career? What would you have done differently?
It's a good question. What would I have done differently? I think I probably just strategically, I'm not quite sure. Like I would go a little bit more to when I let things outside of, well, so when I got driven by the extrinsic or the external pieces, it always pulled away from what I needed to be doing. And so I would often, figure that out and then be able to refocus. But I think sort of really adhering to what I believed was always best for me is something that when I did that, it worked really well. And when I didn't, or when I didn't zoom out and see the effects of how things were going to have to be paid down the road, that it was problematic. So I used an analogy one time. If you know American baseball, it's a 162 game regular season. Okay. And the way that a manager or a coach organizes those 162 games is all about like, how do I keep everybody from like not breaking down and we just win enough that we get into the playoffs. So we get through the 162 games, not everybody's broken down. We've won enough that we're in the next phase. When you move into the playoffs, it's win or go home. So you cannot like they will, pitch people on short rest. They will do aggressive things because there is no tomorrow. And but when you think about that, if you want to win the World Series, you have to do both, but they need to be appropriately timed.
Mm.
And so I was sort of thinking about like when I was managing myself at the wrong phase of the year with those strategies, that's when I would pay a price. And so that's sort of not really zooming out and understanding, hey, yeah, you might go good now, but you're not going to go when it matters the most. And the other thing is I would have done more world championships. So I didn't go to Kona as much as I could have and had the opportunity to. And because I made all kinds of reasons for myself as to why I shouldn't go, financial, blah, blah, blah. And in the end, as I look back, that's something I would have gone there more and raced there more than I did. So those would probably be the things I would specifically think about.
Nice.
Hey JD,
Yep.
thanks for the great talk. That was yeah, it was really insightful, useful. One of the challenges that I struggle with a little bit, kind of going back to the self-confidence theme discussion earlier. As a maturing athlete, a lot of my PRs are in the rearview mirror, and I think I do a pretty decent job at managing that and setting realistic expectations. But I imagine a few others on the call are in that same boat. So I was curious if you just had some thoughts on that topic and strategies how to manage that.
Yeah, I'll say off the top of my head, it isn't something that I've really focused on, so I don't have like a quick answer in that space. I will say something that I've looked into specifically has been related to physical activity levels amongst former elite and collegiate athletes. So for those that continue to do stuff, why are they doing it and what are some of the similarities? So there's different reasons, but one of the things that's been really helpful for people who've been, whatever, like you played collegiate basketball or something, is that they're still active, but they're active in something different. And so the contextualization, the comparison isn't there because they're not comparing themselves as a basketball player because now they're playing tennis or whatever. and they don't know how good of a tennis player they should or shouldn't be. And so I think things get different as you're aging because you're using the same sport. So it might just be in terms of setting some goals ahead of what, the next age group bracket, what you would like to do in that time frame, but maybe also allowing in the space for different types of challenges that still leverage your endurance capabilities, but in a way that you don't really understand. Like I did Otillo a couple years ago with Lars, and that was a way to use endurance training, but I didn't know what it meant to be good in that type of sport. And so maybe having some different outlets where you can just go out and do a thing where it's not necessarily based on a time in conjunction with what you want to do within triathlon might give you like sort of a healthy balance of areas where you are highly driven by some objective measure and another where it's more of adventure, journey, learning, fun sort of thing.
Well, Barry, you could just try and make sure you don't get injured. Stay out of injury-free zone.
That's an important aspect of it, for sure.
Through my life.
I have a lot to say on that topic, but we wouldn't have the time tonight. But having same thing, everything I did that was my best is well and truly behind me, but still finding enjoyment and competitive and things to push myself now looks completely different, and that's like a really big conversation that I'd be happy to like dive into another time for sure. But that is, I've definitely had because I retired in 2012, so a long time to go through that whole process and figure that out what I feel like has been pretty well. But yeah, not enough time tonight to go through that. But be happy to share.
Yeah, but regardless, I mean, that would tie into the athlete for life sort of thing.
Mhm.
I I would love that, if I saw all of you 10, 20 years from now, that you would still be involved and still consider yourself an athlete in whatever capacity that would be, whether that was in endurance sports, triathlon, or something else, just that you, it's particularly now with so many people that don't participate in sport, like you really get to access a piece of humanity that other people don't regularly see in their lives. And being able to push yourself and have fun and be adventurous and use the fitness to, live a better life, a more fun life, is, it's a gift. So even if you're not as fast as you once were, you're still really fast. So keep cracking.
Awesome. Well, Justin,
I
this
just
has
have
been
one
really
quick question
okay.
that, and I don't know, Justin, you may or may not have a good answer.
Yeah.
I've been trying to like for the last 10 minutes figure out how to phrase the question to get an actual useful answer. So is one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about is I tend to do all of my events very conservatively, because most of the things I focus on, as you know, are the long, super long distance swimming. And I always worry, like my one of my biggest fears is just not like it's dying and not finishing before the end. And it's not something where you can just like, oh, sit down and take a break, or like you're sort of out there till till you get done or they pull you out. And so thinking just about mentally ways to try to I guess just race less conservatively, like any tips about that, like how to think about that, and ways to work on that from a mental, I know just practice obviously, and putting the time in to know that I have the skills, but the mental side of that is one of the things that I'm trying to do, like I know, trying to align with what I know I can do to what I actually am comfortable executing on the event day.
Yeah, I'd probably go like to the extreme other end of the spectrum. So it'd be like race some hundreds or 200s or 400s and really try to blow yourself up. You know, where like, because you may find out a lot of times I'll ask people like, when they have a fear of those types of things, I'm like, well, what's the worst case scenario? And so in a 100, 200, 400, it's not that bad. Like I mean, you'll lock up and it'll be uncomfortable, but you know, you'll finish or you can get out or whatever. It's like very low consequence. So that's where I think you want to start out, because yeah, I get it. If you're trying to swim across a sea, you don't want to get it wrong. Consequences can be high. Um, so I don't necessarily think that's like a good spot to begin with in terms of pushing your boundaries of what it means to go too hard. But if you can at least give yourself a space where that's a possibility. So that's why I would say using something very, very short and trying to find where and when you actually blow up and how you respond to it. Because I think it'll just make it more real, and your ability to deal with that is then actually happening versus you're just thinking about what you might do in those circumstances, but you haven't actually had to get into that circumstance to deal with it. So if you can blow yourself up in a 400, you'll actually know how you respond. And that can be a good starting point, even though it may seem way different from what you're doing, but it's still embracing this idea of, you know, I'm in a safe space to fail. I'm not in the middle of the English Channel. So I can give it a go here. And then we'll start to learn what that feels like, how I deal with it, and go forward from there.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, we will we'll sort of close the group questions because we're at the top of the hour, and I know all your time is valuable, including yours, Justin. Is there any final closing thoughts that you would like to just share with the group, Justin?
No, but one thing I would say would be now that I'm kind of out of school, I've been looking into start doing some writing again and go deeper on some of these topics. So if there's anything that was within this that you're like, oh, I would like to hear more about this or that, that can be a place where you know, you can give me some prompts that I could maybe expand upon. You can get in touch with me anytime. It's just my name at gmail.com. And thanks for your time.
Yeah, awesome. And is there a point where you're looking to work with athletes one-on-one and that kind of thing? I know you're just getting going and all of that, but I like to build, as my team knows, I like to build a trusted network. You know, we have our dietitians and physical therapists and physicians and stuff, and I've known Justin a really long time and obviously have a huge trust in him. So if that's something that you're down the road or already looking for, we'd, you know, obviously love to have you on the team, as far as that anyone from here could reach out to you and know that it's a really, really good contact. So I don't know if that's something you're looking for.
Yeah, I'm moving into the consulting space. I'm definitely at the moment right now, I'm still deep in some field work, but I would have capacity. So if there's any interest in those types of things, I will say that it's a little bit different than some other types of coaching or whatever, because it's sort of meant to be like the interventions are meant to be very directed to kind of give you the tools so that you can then go apply them, as opposed to necessarily like meeting over and over and over and over again. It's more of meant to kind of dive into some things that can be helpful, apply to the future, and then circle back sometime down the road if there's something else that you want to focus in on. So
Great. I think that's awesome. Well, awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Justin, and spending it with us. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for everyone who was able to turn up today, because I know your time is valuable, and hopefully you enjoyed it, and definitely we'll all stay in touch, and I will post the recording and send that to you as well, Justin. So yeah, thank you so much and have a good night, everybody.
yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
See you.